Thank you for the introduction, Rajan, and thank you for the invitation to be here. And it is wonderful to be here in Sarajevo. It is my first time visiting here. I'm pretty certain it will not be my last. I had a fantastic visit around the city yesterday, walking around in the sunshine with my sunglasses on. Sadly today, just on stage with my normal glasses, but having the opportunity to talk to you about growth prospects for European tourism, everyone's favorite topic, focus on this region. But we'll see, how bright is the future? Do you need your sunglasses for looking at this outlook? So in a quick summary, what we are looking at, our outlook, cautious optimism. They're the two words I'm using far too often right now. Why are we saying that? Why optimism? Why caution? Well, to begin with, just start with a view of where we are today, overview of our outlook for global travel. So this is a part of this picture is something that very familiar with, which we've touched on in some of the other discussions already, looking at sort of what has happened to travel. There was growth in travel, both domestic and international travel. Then sadly, we all know the pandemic hit, existential crisis for this sector. Activity fell off a cliff, stayed low for some time. Looking here in terms of the overnights rather than just arrivals, so this is sort of one of the other metrics we do follow. I know Sandra talks a lot about nights, but we are very reliant on their data. But this is then looking at nights, which does look at some more of the economic value that's brought by tourism, and you can see that the domestic visitor economy is larger than international. Domestic did come back that bit quicker, and when we talk about recovery, everyone's been talking a lot, including ourselves, talking a lot about recovery, getting back to that 2019 level. Is this recovery? Is this normal? Well, domestic travel globally got back there in 2022. Total travel got back to that pre-pandemic benchmark. Last year, international travel just about got there, a little bit below, as has already been mentioned, in 2023. This year, we expect to see international travel continuing to grow, getting back above that 2019 level. But saying getting back to 2019, is that really recovery? You look at the trend lines, we can see growth, clear growth in both international, domestic travel, pre-pandemic. We are expecting getting recovery back to that growth line fairly soon. Domestic, already back on that growth trend, continuing, but what we're now seeing is this rebalancing, some international travel returning faster, that substitution back away from the domestic, back into the international, that more rapid growth. And when we look at Southeast Europe, that international travel is really important. Again, looking at nights, we can see that the international in this region is around 2.5, 3 times more important than the domestic. Yes, domestic recovered, but it's that recovery in international that's really needed to drive this region. And we do expect that recovery definitely this year, coming way back above those 2019 levels, but there is that gap still to that pre-pandemic trend. So one of the reasons for caution. It is hard, though, for this region to get back to that pre-pandemic trend, just because that growth was so rapid. From around 2015 onwards, we saw growth averaging around 10% a year. So regaining that growth trend, there is a lot of catch-up is needed. We're not quite seeing it in our baseline, so hence that cautious optimism talking about. So just want to touch a bit now on why the caution, but also why the optimism. So reasons for caution, I think, has been touched on already. We are looking at a fairly steady-as-she-goes economic outlook. As we're now getting past that immediate rebound phase of recovery, we are looking to continued growth in incomes, in spending, to drive that continued growth. We do need to see that economic growth happening in order to drive the travel growth, as we have seen over history. And when we look at GDP by major markets, it's a fairly steady picture. We've seen some downturns in major Western economies, notably in Eurozone, recession in the UK. Things are picking up. We're starting to see inflation come under control, interest rates being cut. That will boost some confidence, boost some spending. We'll expect to see some more rapid growth, but still relatively stable. Emerging markets, faster growth coming through in those markets, potentially faster travel growth from them, but still it's not any record-breaking growth. It is still sort of in line with past trends. And of course, there's a lot of risks out there. Inflation mentioned, major risk out there, means that interest rates could be higher, restraining things. Geopolitical risks, that's where we're really having a lot of the concerns in terms of what could go wrong. Sort of, Trump second term is one potential risk, but then you've also got a lot of the geopolitical tensions out there, what's happening in the Middle East, what's happening in terms of Russia, in terms of the war they're taking into Ukraine, plus relationships with NATO, also what's happening with China, Taiwan. And when we produce our forecasts on the economic side as well as on the travel side, every quarter we will produce alternative outcomes. So we'll look at plausible alternative scenario cases. And as these charts here show, there are plenty of reasons for concern out there, plenty of reasons for caution, where we're looking at what could potentially go wrong in terms of inflation, interest rates staying high, in terms of the geopolitical tensions. We could see this relative economic stagnation we've had over the past couple of years, particularly in developed countries. We could see that continuing on into the medium term. But that is not our baseline. Our baseline is the dark blue on here. We do expect to see that increase in growth, and would also like to point out there is an upside case to this. There is definitely possibility for more rapid growth, so hence some of the reason for the optimism. But really, when we're looking at optimism, that does come through when we're looking at travel specifically. We are still seeing travel being prioritized within spending as a whole. People really want to travel. So turning to a survey we run amongst all of our sector contacts, key stakeholders, clients that we serve across travel and tourism sectors worldwide. Bit of a skew towards Western Europe and North America, admittedly, but this is coming from a wide base of respondents. And we are still seeing optimism there. We're asking the question of, are you expecting to see growth or falls in travel, in hotel occupancy over the coming 12 months? And overwhelmingly, we're seeing optimism from that. We're seeing more people responding that they expect growth than we're seeing falls. That's been relatively stable proportions over the last few readings, slightly softened coming into this year, but still an overwhelming positive story from that. And asking about where they're seeing spending being prioritized. Yes, inflation's coming down, but living costs remain high. We're still seeing some squeeze on people's budgets. People are looking to spend more on living costs. But then when you look at that as more discretionary items, asking about where they expect to see that spending being directed, it is more towards travel spending. Still a large proportion, 37% of respondents saying they expect to see increasing in travel spending, and most importantly, a much smaller proportion saying they expect to see falls in travel spending. So we're getting that reading from all of our contacts that travel is still definitely being prioritized. And we're also seeing it in some of the hard data that we look at in terms of consumer spending data, in terms of travel spending data. This is all of the data that's collected, that we collect from national statistical agencies, tourism organizations worldwide. And this is collating this for advanced economies, and we can look at this for all individual markets, and you see differences in levels as people have different cultural relationships with travel. There's different amounts of holiday time that's allowed. People spend different proportions of their budget on travel. But taking an average across advanced economies, we can see that over history, roughly 8% of spending goes on leisure travel, both domestic and outbound. This fluctuates within a band around that, falls in some of years of lower confidence, years such as following and around the global financial crisis. It rises in years where there's higher confidence, but there is that sort of band that you can put around it as normal. Obviously, fell off a cliff during the pandemic, but encouragingly, once people were able to get back and travel, they did. This ratio jumped back up towards the higher end of this normal range last year. people really wanted to get back and travel, really prioritize travel within that overall basket of spending. And all of the early indicators this year point to the fact that it's maybe going to break out of that band. We've seen it break out of that band in certain countries, but across advanced economies as a whole, we're expecting to see this continued prioritization of travel. People spending, what it takes to enjoy these new experiences. Get out there, go to different countries, explore different environments, see different cultures. And that's other things that we're hearing from a lot of stakeholders, from a lot of other analysis, from surveys. We're hearing people want that experiential travel, to get out, see the authentic new destination somewhere different. Word of caution on this, though, we do ask what are the biggest concerns for growth, and it can largely be bucketed as costs. Cost of accommodation, cost of flights, costs of doing business, as well as staffing concerns, staffing shortages, skill shortages, as have been mentioned, challenge that needs to be confronted, which is also related to costs. Some of these were easing late last year, but we're starting to see these come back on the agenda. Earlier this year, we've got the new survey in the field, so we're interested to see how this is going to pan out. We're not seeing it as a major impediment to growth now, but it is something that's of a concern, something we're tracking, and it is something that's maybe affecting some destination choice. But as well as those risks, there are clear opportunities. I think opportunity is another key word when we're looking at the outlook. So there is definitely potential for rapid growth, particularly coming from some longer haul markets, some emerging markets, as well as from short haul demand. So looking at what some of the opportunities could be, probably no major surprises when we're asking people what are the major opportunities for growth. A lot of people talking about events, whether they're business events such as this, bringing people to great cities such as Sarajevo, whether it's leisure events such as sporting events. Got on the larger scale, we've got the Euros about to kick off. We've got Olympics coming up later this year, causing a lot of excitement. But there's also the more smaller scale events, such as we're seeing happening just next door here with the judo championships, bringing people from around Europe, certainly, into Sarajevo as well. Plus, you've got the rise of bleisure travel, the blended travel, everyone's favorite word, bleisure. It is actually happening now rather than just being a buzzword. We're definitely seeing that happening. Plus, value for money being something that is on the list. But the one that is sort of rising, the one which is seeing growing opportunity, is more long-haul travel, particularly coming from emerging markets. And taking a global picture of this, so looking again at this chart of the leisure travel spending as a share of total consumption, if we lay over the developing markets on top of advanced, we can see a slightly different picture here. Still that huge fall during the pandemic, but a slower recovery from developing markets, largely due to some of the greater impediments on travel, notably from China. But what we are seeing there is as travel has become a possibility again from these markets, it is coming back. It's on a slower recovery track, but there is definitely that recovery. And this year, we do expect to see developing markets spending back in terms of similar proportions of their budget on travel as we saw pre-pandemic. Maybe not going that continued growth in terms of that share, but still a lot of growth opportunities from these emerging markets. And that means we're seeing some changes in terms of which source markets are driving growth. So looking here at Europe as a whole, we can see this is sort of contributions to growth. So ranking of the largest source markets worldwide, but this is then looking at the contributions they will make to growth. So a combination of market size and growth. And there's some markets, some traditional markets, obviously still going to be important in driving growth. Short haul, absolutely cannot write it off. The likes of Germany, to a slightly lesser extent UK, but definitely up there as well as France, Netherlands, continuing to drive growth, continuing to be big drivers of that short haul growth. But there are some changes going on in here. USA was a real driver of growth last year. US market came back very strongly. Helped a lot by the strength of the US dollar, but we do see that fading a bit as the dollar is weakening and can't quite be sustained. But offsetting that, we're seeing the likes of China coming back very strongly, coming back taking much larger contributions to growth. Russia also limitations on where that travel is possible, obviously, but still some significant contributions coming from there. One possibly needs to be on a longer run horizon though. India is the one that's sort of posting some very rapid growth rates, but still coming from quite a low base to Europe as a whole. So that is one to watch out for, but it's not an immediate opportunity. But one other thing we are seeing within this is, in this growth returning, is quite how quickly we're coming back to starting to be talking about over-tourism, talking about unbalanced tourism, however we want to determine it. And as we're starting to see some of these long-haul markets coming back, and particularly some of these developing markets continuing, they will want to go back to those same hotspots. It is top of everyone's list is some of those, the key important, iconic destinations. You've got Venice, you've got Paris, where everyone wants to go and have their picture with the Eiffel Tower and so on. And so we're going to start seeing a lot of, crowding in some of these places, which means then the short-haul market might be looking to newer markets. We've seen wanting new experiences, new destinations. That could involve looking at new destinations within Europe. So when we look at this similar picture for the Western Balkan region, it is a slightly different picture, different set of markets. You can see much more importance of the European source markets, the short-haul markets in there. There's also quite a bit of noise as we're getting down to this level. See the more volatility coming from Germany. This is related to primarily German travel to Croatia, where with the introduction of the euro, some price changes, we saw some Germans staying away, some of that sort of value for money, price competitiveness argument there. But we're seeing a reaction to that coming through this year, as well as some other volatilities in there. But still, detracting from that noise, the signal here is that there is growing opportunities for short haul within this region. We're seeing that growth in general in terms of these source markets, prioritization of travel within these markets, plus that desire to visit new destinations and the emerging destinations that sit within this region. And then when you look on the right, this is all opportunity. These longer haul growth markets, small right now, but still opportunities for much more rapid growth in the future. And then just to finish, just a snapshot of what we're looking at by country within this region. So there are the recent performance plus looking to 2026 for this region by bringing together all of these views in terms of the source market growth plus the recent performance. This is then our view of where we're heading. Overwhelmingly, it is a growth outlook, not quite getting back up to that pre-pandemic trend, but still pushing ahead on growth. Some quite divergences across the region, some of this relating to some of the infrastructure, some of the accessibility across the regions we're seeing, but it is also some of the response to recent trends. Croatia, having mentioned, did have that bit of a wobble 2023, introduction of the euro, bit of a softening. We expect to see some reaction to that with some more rapid growth coming along in coming years. Albania doesn't look great on here, but we've got to remember that between 2019 and 2023, there was about 50% growth in terms of travel to Albania. Huge success story in recent years, so we're expecting just sort of a bit of a consolidation there. And if we were to look over the whole period, 19 to 26, Albania is still by far in the lead. But there are other sort of large growth opportunities, and do have to point out for the home audience, the highest growth that we are expecting in the next couple of years is for Bosnia and Herzegovina, averaging around 11% growth per year over the coming years in terms of inbound travel. Still, lower in terms of sort of the visitor volumes, but still rapid growth, seizing some of the opportunities that are out there, but still a lot of clear opportunities for much more rapid growth beyond that. So, got a few summary points on there, which I won't read in the interests of time, but would just like to just leave you just with those keywords again. Our outlook is optimistic, cautiously optimistic within the baseline, but opportunities are out there for a lot more growth, and I look forward to hearing from everyone else throughout the day on how to seize those opportunities. Thank you.